In a remote countryside auction, a broken and defeated stallion trembled in the corner, dismissed by everyone as damaged goods. Not a single person saw any worth in him, except for one fierce teenage girl who walked in with her life savings and an unwavering determination. She took him home despite everyone's warnings, and what followed would silence every doubter and change both their lives forever. The autumn wind whipped through the weathered wooden panels of Mason Valley Horse Auction, carrying with it the mingled scents of hay, leather, and rain-soaked earth. The facility buzzed with its usual Saturday morning energy, seasoned ranchers in mud-caked boots sizing up potential purchases, wealthy estate owners comparing notes on bloodlines, and traders haggling over prices in hushed tones. In the main display area, a magnificent chestnut stallion pranced gracefully, its coat gleaming like polished copper under the morning sun. "Starting bid at $15,000. The auctioneer's voice boomed across the grounds. Hands shot up eagerly as the price climbed higher and higher. But in the furthest holding pen, as far from the action as possible, stood a sight that made most visitors quicken their pace as they walked past. A once proud black stallion named Thunder stood motionless, his head hanging low, ribs protruding sharply beneath a dull, scarred coat. His right hind leg bore the marks of a poorly healed injury, and his eyes, once bright with spirit, now seemed vacant and resigned. "That one's from the Harrison bankruptcy," a trader muttered to his companion. "Used to be quite the jumper until the accident. Now he's not worth the hay he eats." His friend shook his head. "Shame. Should have been put down months ago. No one in their right mind would waste money on a broken horse." But they hadn't noticed 16-year-old Sarah Mitchell, who stood quietly by the pen's corner, her green eyes fixed intently on Thunder. Unlike the designer riding boots and pristine jackets that surrounded her, Sarah wore scuffed work boots and a faded denim jacket patched at the elbows. In her pocket was an envelope containing $847, every dollar she'd earned over 2 years of mucking stalls and giving riding lessons to neighbor kids. As the morning wore on, the atmosphere at Mason Valley grew increasingly tense with competition. Serious buyers crowded around the premium horses, their checkbooks ready, while auction staff hurried between the pens preparing the next showcase animals. The air was thick with the scent of fresh coffee and warm cinnamon rolls from the concession stand, a sharp contrast to the earthy smell of hay and horses. Sarah remained rooted by Thunder's pen, studying every detail of the broken stallion. Though he barely moved, there was something in the way he carried himself, a ghost of former grace that caught her trained eye. She'd grown up watching horses, learning their language through countless hours spent at her Uncle Jack's modest training facility in Pine Creek, where he rehabilitated injured horses that others had given up on. "You're wasting your time, kid," a gruff voice interrupted her thoughts. Sarah turned to find Frank Cooper, one of the region's most prominent horse traders, leaning against the fence. His expensive leather jacket and gold watch marked him as someone who dealt in champions, not cast-offs. "That horse is finished. Harrison ran him into the ground trying to push him past his limits. The leg never healed right." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "What happened to him?" Cooper shrugged, pulling out a silver flask from his jacket pocket. "Championship qualifying round about 8 months ago. Harrison had him jumping higher than he should have, trying to make a name for himself. Horse cleared the jump but landed wrong, snapped something in that back leg. Harrison couldn't afford the proper treatment, and everything went downhill from there." He took a swig and grimaced. Now he's just taking up space. But Sarah had stopped listening. She'd noticed something the others hadn't, the way Thunder's ears twitched at every sudden sound, how his muscles tensed and relaxed beneath his dull coat. There was still life there, still fight, hidden beneath layers of pain and neglect. She thought of her uncle's words from years ago. "A horse's spirit is like a flame, Sarah. Sometimes it burns bright for everyone to see, and sometimes it's just an ember, waiting for someone to breathe it back to life." Moving closer to the pen, Sarah pulled an apple from her pocket. Thunder's nostrils flared slightly at the scent, but he didn't move. "It's okay," she whispered, her voice soft and steady. "I see you." She placed the apple on the ground near him and stepped back, waiting patiently. Several minutes passed. Then, slowly, Thunder took a tentative step forward. His movement was awkward, marked by pain, but his eyes remained fixed on Sarah as he reached for the apple. In that moment, their gazes locked, and Sarah felt a jolt of recognition. Behind the defeat and resignation, she saw a flicker of the proud stallion he'd once been. Sarah Mitchell! A sharp voice cut through the air. Her mother, Elizabeth, hurried across the muddy ground, her face tight with concern. "What are you doing here? I've been looking everywhere for you." She grabbed Sarah's arm, then noticed Thunder. Her expression shifted from worry to dismay. "Oh, honey, no. Is this why you've been saving your money?" "Mom, please," Sarah began, but Elizabeth was already shaking her head. "I know you have your uncle's gift with horses, but this isn't one of his rehabilitation projects. This horse is beyond help. You'd be throwing away your savings." Her voice softened. "I know you want to make a difference, but you have to be realistic." Sarah pulled away gently, turning back to Thunder. "Remember what Uncle Jack always says? The greatest champions aren't born. They're rebuilt from the ground up. This horse isn't done, Mom. He's just waiting for someone to believe in him." Elizabeth sighed, recognizing the determination in her daughter's eyes, the same look she'd seen in her brother Jack's face countless times. "Sarah, we barely have enough space for Maple in our stable. Where would you even keep him?" "Uncle Jack said I could use the empty stall in his rehabilitation barn," Sarah replied quickly. "I've already talked to him about it. He said he'd help me, guide me through the recovery process." As they talked, more potential buyers filtered past Thunder's pen. Some ignored him completely, while others paused only to shake their heads in pity or disgust. "Waste of time," muttered one. "Should be put down," whispered another. Each dismissive comment only strengthened Sarah's resolve. "Ladies and gentlemen," the auctioneer's voice boomed through the speakers. "In 5 minutes, we'll be starting with pen 23. Thunder's pen." Elizabeth looked at her daughter, seeing the mix of hope and determination in her eyes. She recognized that look. It was the same one she'd seen in the mirror years ago, when everyone said a single mother couldn't raise a child and run a business at the same time. Sometimes, she realized, the greatest victories came from refusing to accept other people's limitations. "Are you sure about this?" she asked finally, her voice softer. Sarah nodded, her hand resting on the rough wooden fence. "More sure than I've ever been about anything." The auctioneer's voice crackled through the speakers, noticeably less enthusiastic than before. "Moving on to pen 23, folks. We have here a 7-year-old black stallion, former show jumper." He paused, clearing his throat uncomfortably. "Horse is being sold as is, with full disclosure of a previous injury. Can I get an opening bid of $500? The crowd that had eagerly gathered for previous lots now thinned considerably. Those who remained wore expressions ranging from mild curiosity to outright skepticism. Sarah stood straight, her heart pounding against her ribs as she clutched the envelope containing her savings. Her mother stood beside her, a supportive hand on her shoulder. Silence hung heavy in the air. Thunder stood motionless in his pen, as if he too understood the gravity of the moment. The auctioneer shifted uncomfortably. "Come on, folks, $500 for a purebred stallion. He's still got some good years in him." A derisive laugh cut through the silence. "Yeah, as dog food, maybe," someone called from the back, drawing scattered chuckles from the crowd. Sarah felt her cheeks burn, but she held her ground. "All right then, let's start lower. Do I hear 300? The auctioneer's voice had taken on an almost pleading tone. Still, no response. 200? Finally, a hand went up. 100, called out a heavy-set man in a leather vest. Sarah recognized him as the owner of the local rendering plant. Her stomach turned. She knew exactly what fate awaited Thunder if he won the bid. $100, I have 100, the auctioneer announced. Do I hear 150? Sarah's hand shot up. 300. Her voice rang out clear and strong, surprising even herself. A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd as people turned to look at the teenage girl making such a bold bid on a broken horse. The rendering plant owner's eyes narrowed. $350, he countered almost lazily. $400. Sarah responded immediately, her voice steady despite her racing heart. $450. Sarah swallowed hard. $500. She could feel her mother's hand tighten on her shoulder, but she didn't waver. The man smirked. $550. Each bid was like a physical blow to Sarah's limited funds, but she refused to give up. $600. Her voice cracked slightly this time. $650, the man called out, starting to look annoyed. Sarah took a deep breath. $700. She was pushing dangerously close to the limits of her savings now. The rendering plant owner turned to face her fully, his expression hardening. $750, he growled, clearly irritated by her persistence. Sarah's heart sank. She had exactly $847. One more bid would push her to her absolute limit, leaving her nothing for feed, medical supplies, or any of the countless things Thunder would need. But looking at the stallion, seeing the quiet dignity still present in his bearing despite everything, she knew she couldn't give up. $800, she called out, her voice barely above a whisper. The crowd fell silent, all eyes moving between Sarah and the rendering plant owner. He studied her for a long moment, then shook his head with a grunt. All yours, kid. Hope you know what you're getting into. He turned and walked away, leaving Sarah trembling with relief. $800 going once, the auctioneer called out, his voice carrying a note of surprise. Going twice. Are sold to the young lady in the blue jacket. A mixture of reactions rippled through the remaining spectators. Some shook their heads in disbelief, others whispered among themselves about the foolishness of youth. Frank Cooper, who had been watching from the sidelines, approached Sarah with a stern expression. "You're making a huge mistake, girl," he said, his voice low and serious. "That horse is finished. You just wasted your money on a lost cause." Sarah lifted her chin, meeting his gaze. "No, sir. I just invested in a future champion." Cooper laughed, but there was no humor in it. "A champion? That horse won't ever jump again. Mark my words, you'll be back here in a month trying to sell him for half what you paid." "Maybe," Sarah replied calmly. "But at least I'm giving him a chance. That's more than anyone else was willing to do." As the crowd dispersed, Sarah approached Thunder's pen with the official paperwork in hand. The stallion watched her with those deep, intelligent eyes that had first caught her attention. She reached out slowly, letting him catch her scent. After a moment's hesitation, he stretched his neck forward, his soft muzzle brushing against her palm. "Let's show them what you're really made of," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You and me, Thunder. We're going to prove them all wrong." Elizabeth appeared beside her, carrying a sturdy halter she'd just purchased from one of the vendors. "Well, you did it," she said, her voice a mixture of pride and concern. "Now comes the hard part." Sarah nodded, understanding the challenge that lay ahead. She had spent every penny she owned on a horse that most people had written off as worthless. She had no money left for feed, medical supplies, or specialized training equipment. All she had was determination, her uncle's promise of guidance, and an unshakable belief in Thunder's potential. As she slipped the halter over Thunder's head, her hand gentle but confident, Sarah knew this was just the beginning of their story. The real test would lie in the days, weeks, and months ahead. In the early mornings and late nights, in the moments of doubt and frustration, in the small victories and inevitable setbacks that awaited them. The journey home from Mason Valley auction proved more challenging than Sarah had anticipated. Thunder's damaged leg made every step a careful negotiation, and the 2-mile walk to Uncle Jack's rehabilitation facility seemed to stretch endlessly before them. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the dirt road as Sarah led Thunder with patient determination, stopping whenever he needed rest. "Easy, boy," she murmured, watching him struggle with each step. "We'll take as long as you need." Her mother had gone ahead to inform Uncle Jack of their arrival and prepare the stable, leaving Sarah alone with Thunder for the first time. The silence between their stops was broken only by the sound of his labored breathing and the occasional distant cry of a hawk. When they finally arrived at Pine Creek Rehabilitation Center, Uncle Jack was waiting by the gate. His weathered face, lined from years under the sun, broke into a complex expression, part concern, part curiosity, and part pride in his niece's determination. The facility itself was modest compared to the region's larger stables, but it had earned a reputation for working miracles with injured horses that others had given up on. "Well, let's have a look at our new resident," Jack said, approaching slowly. His experienced eyes took in every detail of Thunder's condition, the way he favored his right hind leg, the tension in his muscles, the dull coat that spoke of months of neglect. "Sarah, grab my medical kit from the office. We need to do a proper assessment before we get him settled." As Sarah hurried to the small office building, she could hear her uncle speaking softly to Thunder, his voice carrying the same gentle authority she'd always admired. When she returned with the kit, Jack was running his hands carefully along Thunder's injured leg, his touch professional but gentle. "Harrison did quite a number on him," Jack muttered more to himself than to Sarah. "Ligament damage, definitely. Probably some underlying muscle atrophy, too. But," he paused, straightening up, "nothing that can't be helped with the right care and patience." Sarah's heart lifted. "So you think there's hope?" Jack met her eyes seriously. "There's always hope, kiddo, but this won't be easy. We're looking at months of rehabilitation, and even then there's no guarantee he'll ever jump again." "Are you ready for that kind of commitment?" "I am," Sarah replied without hesitation. "Whatever it takes." For the next hour, Jack taught Sarah how to properly examine Thunder's injury, explaining what to look for and how to gauge his pain levels. They created a detailed chart of his current condition: weight, muscle tone, joint flexibility, and overall health markers. The more they documented, the more Sarah realized just how much work lay ahead. "First priority is getting some weight back on him," Jack explained as they led Thunder to his new stall. "We'll start him on small, frequent meals. His stomach won't be able to handle large portions yet. Then we'll begin with very gentle exercises, just basic movements to help rebuild his muscle strength." The stall had been prepared with fresh straw and clean water. Sarah had spent her last few dollars on a small supply of feed, but she knew it wouldn't last long. As if reading her thoughts, Jack placed a hand on her shoulder. "Don't worry about the feed for now," he said softly. "Consider it an investment in your future as a trainer, but you'll work it off. I expect you here every morning at dawn, and you'll help with the other horses too. Deal?" Sarah hugged him tightly. "Deal. Thank you, Uncle Jack." That evening, after everyone else had left, Sarah stayed behind to ensure Thunder was settling in. She pulled up a small stool and sat outside his stall, simply talking to him in a soft, steady voice. She told him about her dreams of becoming a trainer like her uncle, about the competitions she'd watched where horses performed seemingly impossible feats, about her belief in second chances. Thunder listened, his ears forward, occasionally nickering softly in response. Though he still kept his distance, Sarah noticed he stayed near her side of the stall instead of retreating to the corner. It was a small thing, but in that moment it felt like a victory. As the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Sarah reluctantly prepared to leave. "I'll be back first thing tomorrow," she promised Thunder. "We're in this together now, boy, no matter what anyone else says." Walking home in the gathering dusk, Sarah's mind was already racing with plans and possibilities. She knew the road ahead would be difficult. She'd seen enough of her uncle's rehabilitation cases to understand that. But she also knew that sometimes the most broken horses turned out to be the strongest, once they found someone who believed in them. Tomorrow would bring the real beginning of their journey with all its challenges and uncertainties. But for now, Sarah held on to the small victory of the day. The fact that Thunder, against all odds, had found his way to someone who saw past his injuries to the champion he could still become. The next few weeks at Pine Creek tested Sarah's determination in ways she hadn't imagined. Her days began before sunrise, arriving at the stable while frost still glittered on the grass. Between caring for Thunder and helping with the facility's other horses to pay for his keep, every muscle in her body ached by nightfall. But it was Thunder's slow progress that truly challenged her resolve. "You have to understand what he's been through," Uncle Jack explained one morning, watching as Sarah struggled to get Thunder to take more than a few steps from his stall. "It's not just the physical injury. He's learned that movement means pain. We have to help him unlearn that fear." The rehabilitation program they developed was methodical, but painfully slow. Each morning began with gentle massage techniques Jack had taught her, working to relieve the tension in Thunder's damaged muscles. The stallion remained wary of touch, sometimes flinching away when she reached for his injured leg. "Easy now," Sarah would whisper, starting over each time with infinite patience. "I won't hurt you. You can trust me." One particularly frustrating morning, after Thunder had refused to leave his stall for the third day in a row, Sarah found herself fighting back tears of frustration. Lisa Chen, the local veterinarian who'd been monitoring Thunder's progress, arrived for his weekly checkup and found Sarah sitting on a hay bale, her face buried in her hands. "Having one of those days?" Lisa asked gently, setting down her medical bag. She'd known Sarah since she was a little girl, always trailing after her uncle with endless questions about horses. Sarah looked up, quickly wiping her eyes. I thought we were making progress, but now it feels like we're going backwards. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe I'm in over my head." Lisa pulled up another hay bale and sat down. "Let me tell you something about rehabilitation," she said, her voice carrying years of experience. "It's never a straight line. Some days you'll see amazing progress, and other days it feels like you're right back where you started. But that doesn't mean you're failing." The vet stood and walked over to Thunder's stall. The stallion watched her approach with cautious eyes. "Look at his coat," she pointed out. "See how it's starting to get its shine back? And his eyes, there's alertness there that wasn't present when you brought him in. Those are victories, Sarah. Small ones, but they matter." Sarah joined her at the stall, really looking at Thunder. Lisa was right. Beneath the obvious challenges, there were subtle signs of improvement. His ribs were less prominent, and he held his head higher than before. "The problem," Lisa continued, "is that you're so focused on where you want him to be, you're missing how far he's already come. Healing takes time, especially when you're rebuilding trust along with muscle." That afternoon, Sarah tried a different approach. Instead of immediately attempting to lead Thunder out, she simply sat near his stall with a book, reading aloud occasionally in a soft voice. After an hour there, she noticed him edging closer, curiosity gradually overcoming caution. Taking a chance, she pulled an apple from her pocket and held it out, not looking directly at him. Minutes passed in silence. Then, slowly, Thunder stretched his neck forward and took the apple from her hand. It was the first time he'd willingly initiated contact. "Good boy," Sarah whispered, her heart soaring. She resisted the urge to reach out and touch him, letting him retreat at his own pace. Sometimes she realized progress meant knowing when not to push. The breakthrough came later that week during their morning routine. Instead of trying to lead Thunder out, Sarah simply opened his stall door and waited. To her amazement, after several minutes of hesitation, he limped out on his own, following her without the lead rope. "Well, would you look at that?" Uncle Jack's voice came from the barn entrance. He'd been watching quietly, understanding the significance of the moment. "He chose to come out," Sarah said softly, hardly daring to move. "All this time I've been trying to make him, but he just needed to decide for himself." Jack nodded, a knowing smile crossing his face. "That's the thing about horses, especially ones that have been through trauma. You can't force their trust. You can only create the conditions that allow them to trust again." That evening, as Sarah completed her final stable checks, she paused at Thunder's stall. The stallion was resting peacefully, his breathing steady and calm. Something had shifted between them, a small but crucial change in their relationship. "We'll get there," she promised him quietly. "Maybe not as fast as I wanted, but we'll get there together." As she walked home under a sky filled with stars, Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead was still long and uncertain, but she was beginning to understand that healing, whether for horses or humans, couldn't be rushed. Sometimes the biggest victories came disguised as small moments, and progress was measured not in leaps and bounds, but in tiny steps forward. Early autumn gave way to winter's first chill as Thunder's rehabilitation entered a new phase. With trust slowly building and his basic strength improving, Uncle Jack decided it was time to begin more structured training. Sarah arrived at the stable one morning to find her uncle setting up a series of ground poles in the indoor arena. Nothing high, just simple wooden poles laid flat on the ground. "Time to see what those legs remember," Jack said, adjusting the spacing between the poles. "But first, I want you to understand something, Sarah. This isn't about getting him to jump again. Not yet. This is about rebuilding his confidence and muscle memory." The indoor arena became their sanctuary as winter storms raged outside. Sarah learned to read Thunder's every movement, to recognize the subtle signs that indicated pain or fatigue. Some days, they did nothing more than walk between the poles, Thunder placing each hoof with deliberate care. Other days, they worked on basic groundwork exercises designed to strengthen his injured leg. "Movement is medicine," Dr. Chen explained during one of her visits, watching Thunder navigate the poles with increasing stability. But only if we respect his limits. Push too hard, and we'll undo months of progress. One particularly cold morning, Sarah arrived to find an unexpected visitor at Pine Creek. Marcus Reynolds, a renowned equine physiotherapist, stood talking with Uncle Jack near the arena. Sarah's heart skipped. Marcus was known for working with Olympic-level horses, and his services commanded fees far beyond what she could afford. "Sarah," Jack called her over, "Marcus is an old friend. He's agreed to take a look at Thunder and give us some guidance." For the next hour, Sarah watched in fascination as Marcus worked with Thunder, his experienced hands identifying areas of tension and weakness that they hadn't noticed. He showed her new therapeutic exercises and massage techniques, explaining how each movement contributed to healing. "There's something special about this horse," Marcus remarked as he finished his examination. "Most horses with this type of injury develop compensatory problems from favoring their good leg. But he's maintained remarkable balance despite everything. That speaks to his inherent athleticism and to the quality of care he's received." Sarah beamed with pride, but Marcus wasn't finished. "However," he continued, his tone serious, "you need to understand that he may never compete at high levels again. The damage to his leg was severe, and while he's healing well, there will always be limitations." "I understand," Sarah replied, though her heart sank slightly. "But even if he never jumps competitively again, I just want him to be able to run and move without pain." Marcus smiled, clearly approving of her answer. "That's exactly the attitude he needs. Now let me show you some additional exercises that will help." The next few weeks brought a new intensity to their training routine. Sarah arrived earlier each morning to incorporate Marcus's techniques before school. She learned to feel the subtle differences in Thunder's muscle tension, to recognize when he needed to push harder and when he needed rest. One snowy afternoon, as Sarah worked with Thunder in the arena, she noticed something different in his demeanor. The stallion moved with more confidence, his steps more assured as they approached the ground poles. Without prompting, he lifted his feet higher than necessary, as if remembering his jumping days. "Look at that," Uncle Jack murmured from the sidelines. "He's starting to remember who he is." Sarah's heart swelled as she watched Thunder navigate the poles with growing enthusiasm. For the first time since she'd bought him, she caught a glimpse of the champion he'd once been, and perhaps could be again. But their progress didn't go unnoticed. Word began to spread about the miracle at Pine Creek, drawing unwanted attention. One afternoon, Frank Cooper, the trader from the auction, showed up unannounced. "Well, well," he said, leaning against the arena fence. "I have to admit, you've done more with him than I thought possible." His eyes tracked Thunder's movements with professional assessment. "In fact, I might be interested in making you an offer, a generous one. Sarah felt her chest tighten. He's not for sale. Cooper's smile didn't reach his eyes. Everything's for sale, kid. You've put in the hard work. Now let someone with resources take him to the next level. I've got connections with top training facilities. I said no, Sarah interrupted firmly. Thunder stays here. As Cooper drove away, Uncle Jack appeared beside her. You'll get more offers, he warned. Better ones. Are you ready for that? Sarah watched Thunder moving freely around the arena, his coat gleaming in the winter sunlight. They don't understand, she said softly. This isn't about money. It's about believing in someone when no one else would. That evening, as snow began to fall outside, Sarah spent extra time with Thunder, brushing his coat until it shone. The frightened, broken horse from the auction was gone, replaced by an animal who held his head high and nickered in greeting when she entered his stall. We're just getting started, she whispered, pressing her forehead against his. And we're going to show them all what second chances look like. Spring arrived at Pine Creek, bringing with it new possibilities and unexpected challenges. The morning dew sparkled on the grass as Sarah led Thunder into the outdoor arena for the first time since winter. His rehabilitation had progressed remarkably. The pronounced limp was now barely noticeable, and his muscles had rebuilt to the point where he carried himself with the natural grace of an athlete. Time to take it up a notch, Uncle Jack announced, arranging several small cross rails, jumping obstacles no higher than 2 feet. Sarah's heart raced with both excitement and apprehension. They hadn't attempted any real jumps since Thunder's arrival 6 months ago. Are you sure he's ready? Sarah asked, watching Thunder eye the new obstacles with visible interest. His ears were pricked forward, showing curiosity rather than fear. We won't know until we try, Jack replied, adjusting the last rail. But watch his body language. He's telling us he wants to do more. As they began their warm-up, a sleek black SUV pulled up to the facility. Dr. Chen stepped out, along with a tall, distinguished-looking man in an expensive riding jacket. Sarah recognized him immediately. James Morrison, one of the most successful show-jumping trainers in the region. Don't stop, Jack called out as Sarah's attention wavered. Let them watch. Sarah refocused on Thunder, guiding him through their usual exercises. His movements were fluid and confident, showing no sign of his previous injury. As they approached the first crossrail, Sarah held her breath, letting Thunder decide whether to take it. The stallion gathered himself and with surprising grace popped over the small jump. His landing was smooth, controlled, and, most importantly, pain-free. Sarah's heart soared as she heard quiet applause from the fence. Impressive, Morrison remarked, approaching with Dr. Chen. Lisa told me about your rehabilitation project, but I had to see it for myself. Mind if I take a closer look? Sarah guided Thunder over to the fence, noting how the stallion carried himself with quiet dignity. Morrison's expert eyes studied every aspect of Thunder's movement and conformation. The leg will never be quite what it was, Dr. Chen commented, but the compensation mechanisms he's developed are remarkable. Morrison nodded thoughtfully. Sarah, is it? I'm going to be direct. There's a junior jumping competition in Cedar Grove next month. Nothing too demanding. Maximum height of 3 feet. I think you should enter. Sarah's breath caught. You really think he's ready for competition? Ready? That's what we're going to find out, Morrison replied. Look, I've got a training facility 20 minutes from here. Bring him over 3 times a week, and I'll help you prepare. No charge. Uncle Jack stepped forward, his expression cautious. That's a generous offer, James. What's the catch? Morrison smiled. No catch. Let's just say I've got a soft spot for comeback stories. Besides, he added, watching Thunder with professional admiration, there's something special about this horse. He's got heart, and that's something you can't train into them. The next few weeks became a whirlwind of intense training. Morrison proved to be a demanding but brilliant instructor, pushing Sarah and Thunder to refine their communication and technique. The small crossrails gradually became higher jumps, each success building their confidence. But not everyone shared their optimism. During one training session, Sarah overheard two riders at Morrison's facility discussing Thunder. "Can you believe Morrison's wasting his time on that rescue case?" one whispered. "Once a horse breaks down like that, they're never the same." "I heard the girl bought him for practically nothing at auction," the other replied. "Probably just trying to flip him for a profit now that he's somewhat sound." Sarah's cheeks burned, but she channeled her anger into determination. That afternoon, she and Thunder executed their most precise jumping round yet, drawing admiring looks from even their critics. "You know why they're talking?" Morrison asked later, helping Sarah cool Thunder down. "Because they're starting to see him as competition. You've turned their pity into envy, and that's making them nervous." As the competition drew closer, Sarah faced another challenge. The entry fee was substantial, and even with Morrison waiving his training fees, she needed money for transportation and equipment. Her mother offered to help, but Sarah was determined to handle it herself. The solution came from an unexpected source. Uncle Jack's clients, hearing about Thunder's progress, began asking Sarah to work with their horses. Word spread about her gentle but effective rehabilitation techniques, and soon she had a small but growing business. "You've got the touch," Jack remarked proudly, watching her work with a nervous mare. "Thunder taught you well." The evening before the competition, Sarah sat in Thunder's stall, her mind racing with possibilities and fears. The stallion rested his head on her shoulder, his breath warm and steady. "Remember when no one wanted you?" she whispered, stroking his neck. "Now look at you. Whatever happens tomorrow, you've already proven them wrong." Unknown to Sarah, she had another observer. Morrison stood quietly outside the stall, watching the bond between horse and rider. He'd trained countless champions over his career, but there was something different about this pair. Something that went beyond technique and talent. "Sometimes," he murmured to himself, "the greatest victories happen long before anyone steps into the show ring." The morning of the Cedar Grove competition dawned clear and cool. Sarah arrived at Pine Creek before sunrise to find Uncle Jack already loading equipment into his old truck. Thunder stood quietly in the trailer, his coat gleaming from the thorough grooming she'd given him the night before. "Ready for this?" Jack asked, noting the mixture of excitement and nervousness on his niece's face. Sarah nodded, though her hands trembled slightly as she double-checked Thunder's protective boots. The drive to Cedar Grove Equestrian Center took nearly 2 hours. As they pulled into the bustling showgrounds, Sarah's breath caught at the sight. Pristine jumping arenas stretched out before them, professional trailers lined the parking area, and riders in polished show attire warmed up their expensive horses. "Don't let it intimidate you," Morrison's voice came from behind them as they unloaded Thunder. "Half these horses couldn't have done what Thunder's done, coming back from where he was. Remember that." The warm-up arena was crowded with competitors, many of whom paused their preparations to watch as Sarah and Thunder entered. She could hear the whispers. "Isn't that the auction horse? Can you believe they're actually competing? This should be interesting." Thunder, however, seemed unfazed by the attention. His ears were pricked forward, scanning the new environment with interest rather than fear. As they began their warm-up routine, Sarah felt him lift beneath her, his movements displaying a confidence that settled her own nerves. "Look at that stride," Morrison commented, watching them navigate the practice jumps. "He's not just going through the motions, he's enjoying himself. That's what we want to see." Their class wouldn't start for another hour, giving Sarah time to walk the course with Morrison. The jumps, while not particularly high, were technically challenging, requiring precise turns and careful timing. "Remember," Morrison advised as they studied the course, "you're not just here to complete it. Show them what he can do. Show them what heart looks like." As they returned to the warm-up area, Sarah noticed a cluster of riders gathered around a tall bay horse. At its center stood Alexis Warner, the regional junior champion, sitting astride her imported warm blood with practiced poise. "Well, if it isn't the miracle worker," Alexis called out. her voice carrying just enough edge to make her disdain clear. "How much did you pay for that one again?" $200. $800, actually, Sarah replied calmly, remembering Thunder's quiet dignity in the face of rejection. "Best investment I've ever made." Alexis laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. "Well, this should be entertaining at least. Try not to embarrass yourself too much." Before Sarah could respond, Morrison appeared beside them. "You know Alexis?" he said, his voice carrying the weight of his reputation. "I seem to remember training your mother back when she was starting out. She rode a rescued off-track thoroughbred, not so different from Thunder here, went on to win nationals with him." Alexis's face flushed as she quickly guided her horse away. Sarah shot Morrison a grateful look, but he was already focused on their final preparations. As their turn approached, Sarah felt a strange calm settle over her. In the collecting ring, Thunder stood quietly, his ears focused forward waiting for their signal. This wasn't about proving anything to anyone else anymore. It was about honoring the journey they'd taken together. Number 147, Sarah Mitchell riding Thunder. The announcer's voice echoed across the arena. A murmur went through the crowd as they entered. Clearly, word of Thunder's story had spread. The first jump approached, and Sarah felt Thunder gather himself beneath her. They soared over it with room to spare, landing in perfect stride for the turn to fence 2. Each jump felt like a dance they'd rehearsed 1,000 times, Thunder's previously injured leg showing no sign of weakness. As they approached the final combination, 3 jumps in quick succession, Sarah heard the crowd's collective intake of breath. This would be the real test of Thunder's recovery. Time seemed to slow as they met each jump, Thunder's power and grace carrying them through with precision that drew spontaneous applause. They crossed the finish line clear. No rails down, no time faults. The applause grew stronger as Sarah patted Thunder's neck, tears of joy threatening to spill from her eyes. They'd done more than just complete the course. They'd shown everyone what was possible when you believed in second chances. Their time put them in second place, behind only Alexis's polished round. But as they left the arena, the reality of what they'd accomplished hit Sarah fully. 6 months ago, most people thought Thunder would never jump again, let alone compete. "Now that," Morrison said, grinning broadly as they returned to the warm-up area, "is what I call a comeback." Even Alexis, passing them on her way to collect her blue ribbon, nodded with newfound respect. "Nice round," she said quietly. "Your horse. He's something special." That evening, as they loaded Thunder back into the trailer, Uncle Jack handed Sarah their red ribbon. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "sometimes second place feels more like a victory than first, especially when you consider how far you've come." Sarah looked at Thunder, his dark eyes bright with the satisfaction of a job well done. "We're just getting started," she said, running her hand along his neck. "Aren't we, boy?" The success at Cedar Grove changed everything. Within weeks, Pine Creek was flooded with visitors, some genuinely interested in Thunder's rehabilitation story, others barely concealing their skepticism. But it was the arrival of Victoria Blackwood, owner of the prestigious Blackwood Equestrian Center, that marked a turning point. Sarah was working with Thunder in the outdoor arena, practicing a new jumping combination, when the distinctive purr of a Rolls-Royce caught her attention. Victoria stepped out, her riding boots gleaming and her posture radiating authority. Behind her emerged a young man Sarah recognized instantly, Thomas Blackwood, the rising star of international show jumping. "Impressive," Victoria remarked, watching Thunder clear the jumps with fluid grace. "James Morrison tells me you've accomplished quite the miracle with this one." Her keen eyes studied Thunder's movement, particularly his formerly injured leg. "He did all the hard work," Sarah replied, bringing Thunder to a halt. "I just believed in him." Victoria's lips curved in a slight smile. "Modesty is charming, dear, but let's be direct. Etan and the Western Regional Championships are in 3 months. I want you and Thunder to compete. Under the Blackwood banner." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. The Western Regionals were several levels above anything they'd attempted. More importantly, competing under the Blackwood name meant access to world-class training facilities, top veterinary care, and opportunities she could only dream of. That's incredibly generous, Sarah managed, glancing at Thunderbuzz. But why? Thomas stepped forward, his expression thoughtful. Because you've done something remarkable here. Taking a horse everyone had written off and bringing him back to this level, that's the kind of story that inspires people. And frankly, he added with a grin, it's the kind of publicity money can't buy. Victoria nodded. We'll cover all expenses, provide additional training, and ensure Thunder receives the best care available. All you need to do is compete. Before Sarah could respond, Uncle Jack appeared beside them. And what happens if they win? He asked, his voice carrying a note of caution. Or if they don't? If they win, we discuss a more permanent arrangement, Victoria replied smoothly. If not, they'll have had an incredible opportunity and exposure. Either way, Sarah and Thunder benefit. That evening, Sarah sat in Thunder's stall, her mind churning with possibilities. The opportunity was incredible, beyond anything she'd imagined possible when she first saw Thunder at the auction. But something about it made her uneasy. What do you think, boy? She whispered, stroking his neck. Thunder nickered softly, pressing his head against her shoulder. Morrison arrived later that night, having heard about Victoria's offer. It's a good opportunity, he said, leaning against the stall door. But remember, opportunities often come with strings attached. What do you mean? Victoria Blackwood doesn't do anything without a reason, he explained. Yes, she's offering you amazing resources, but she's also buying into Thunder's story. Make sure you understand what you're signing up for. The next few days were a whirlwind of discussions and decisions. Victoria's legal team presented contracts. Uncle Jack insisted on having them reviewed by a lawyer, and Sarah found herself caught between excitement and apprehension. Dr. Chen's visit added another layer of complexity. After examining Thunder thoroughly, she pulled Sarah aside. Physically, he's stronger than ever, she said. But the Western regionals are intense. Multiple rounds over several days. Higher jumps. More technical courses. Are you sure you want to put him through that? Sarah watched Thunder grazing peacefully in the paddock, remembering the broken horse from the auction. What do you think he wants? She asked softly. Dr. Chen smiled. That's the right question to ask. And based on what I've seen, he wants to compete. He comes alive in the arena now. Just make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. Finally, after much deliberation, Sarah made her decision. She would accept Victoria's offer, with conditions. Thunder would remain at Pine Creek, continuing his regular routine with additional training at Blackwood. She wouldn't sign any long-term contracts until after the championships, and all decisions about Thunder's welfare would remain solely hers. To her surprise, Victoria agreed readily. Smart girl, she said, signing the modified agreement. You understand your horse's value, not just his monetary worth, but his true value. That's rare in this sport. As the news spread through the equestrian community, reactions were mixed. Some celebrated the underdog story, while others scoffed at the idea of an auction rescue competing at such a prestigious level. But Sarah remained focused on what mattered most, Thunder's well-being and their continued progress together. The training intensified under the new arrangement. Thomas Blackwood proved to be an excellent mentor, sharing insights from his international experience while respecting the special bond between Sarah and Thunder. You know what makes you two different? He said one day, watching them tackle a particularly challenging combination. Most riders at this level see their horses as instruments of their ambition. You and Thunder? You're partners. Keep that. It's your strength. With just 6 weeks until the Western Regional Championships, Pine Creek transformed into a hub of focused energy. The training schedule Victoria Blackwood designed was rigorous. Early morning conditioning, afternoon jumping sessions, and specialized therapy treatments to maintain Thunder's peak condition. Sarah found herself juggling schoolwork with increasingly demanding preparation, often studying by flashlight in Thunder's stall late into the evening. You need to pace yourself, Uncle Jack cautioned one morning. finding Sarah asleep in the tack room surrounded by physics notebooks. Both of you do. Burning out before the competition won't help anyone. But it wasn't just the physical preparation that weighed on them. The pressure of competing under the Blackwood name brought unexpected challenges. Reporters began showing up at Pine Creek, eager to cover the story of the miracle horse and his young rider. Camera flashes and probing questions became a regular interruption to their training routine. "Focus on the story they're not seeing," Morrison advised during one particularly intense session. "They want the fairy tale, the rescue horse turned champion. But what matters is right here, in this arena between you and Thunder." One afternoon, as Sarah worked Thunder through a complex jumping pattern, Victoria arrived with an unexpected guest. Marcus Reynolds, the equine physiotherapist who had helped them months ago. His expression was serious as he watched Thunder move. "Something's different," he said, studying the horse's gait. "Not wrong, exactly, but different." After a thorough examination, he explained, "He's developed a new way of distributing weight over that back leg. It's efficient, but it could become problematic under championship-level stress." Victoria's face tightened with concern. "Can it be addressed?" "Yes, but it will require adjustments to his training schedule. More emphasis on specific exercises, possibly some changes to his jumping technique." Sarah felt her stomach knot. "Will this affect our chances at the championships?" Marcus smiled kindly. "That depends on how you define success. Can you compete? Absolutely. Can you win? That's always been about more than just physical capability." The next few weeks brought a modified training regimen. Sarah learned new exercises designed to help Thunder maintain his strength while protecting his reformed jumping style. Thomas Blackwood spent extra hours with them, fine-tuning their approach to different types of obstacles. "The technical rounds will be your advantage," he explained, setting up a particularly challenging combination. "Thunder's style may not be conventional anymore, but his intelligence and your partnership make up for it. Use that." As the competition drew closer, Sarah noticed subtle changes in Thunder's demeanor. The formerly broken horse now carried himself with quiet confidence, his eyes bright with enthusiasm for their daily work. During one evening cool-down, Dr. Chen observed them thoughtfully. "You know what's remarkable?" she said. "He's not just physically stronger, he's emotionally transformed. That's rarer than you might think in rehabilitation cases." But not everyone shared their optimism. During a training session at Blackwood Equestrian Center, Sarah overheard two grooms discussing their chances. "It's a nice story and all, but the regionals? That's a whole different level. One bad landing on that leg." Victoria silenced such talk quickly, but the concern lingered in Sarah's mind. Late that night, she confided her fears to Uncle Jack. "You're not just carrying Thunder's hopes now," he acknowledged. "You're carrying the expectations of a lot of people, but remember why you started this journey. It wasn't about winning championships." Sarah nodded, remembering that day at the auction. "It was about giving him a chance when no one else would." "Exactly. And look how far that chance has taken you both." The final week before the championships brought a flurry of activity. Victoria's team arrived with new equipment, a custom saddle designed to optimize Thunder's jumping technique, specialized boots to support his legs, even a therapeutic blanket for between rounds. "Everything's state-of-the-art," Victoria declared proudly. "You'll have every advantage we can give you." But it was Morrison's gift that touched Sarah most deeply. A simple brass nameplate for Thunder's stall, engraved with words that brought tears to her eyes. "Never underestimate the heart of a champion." The evening before they were due to leave for the championships, Sarah sat in Thunder's stall, just as she had done countless times before. The stallion rested his head on her shoulder, his breath warm and steady. "Whatever happens tomorrow," she whispered, she's already proven them all wrong. You're not just a rescue horse anymore, you're a symbol of what's possible when someone believes in you." From the barn doorway, Thomas watched the quiet moment between horse and rider. "That's why they'll be hard to beat," he said softly to his mother. They're not just competing, they're writing their own story. The Western Regional Championship sprawled across the vast show grounds of Silver Oak Equestrian Center, a facility that made Cedar Grove look modest in comparison. International flags snapped in the morning breeze, and the air hummed with anticipation as competitors from across the region arrived with their premier horses. Sarah's heart pounded as Uncle Jack's truck wound through the impressive grounds. Thunder stood calmly in the trailer, seemingly unaffected by the charged atmosphere. Victoria had arranged for them to stable in the premium barn area, where top competitors kept their horses. "Remember," Thomas said, helping them unload, "this is a 3-day event. Today's qualifier will determine your position for tomorrow's technical round. Then, the top 20 move on to the final day. Pace yourselves." The stabling area was a showcase of equestrian wealth. Gleaming European warm bloods worth hundreds of thousands of dollars occupied every stall. As they led Thunder to his assigned space, Sarah couldn't help but notice the stark contrast between their humble beginnings and their current surroundings. "Well, well," a familiar voice called out. "Look who made it to the big leagues." Alexis Warner approached, leading her bay stallion, but this time, her tone carried less mockery and more genuine curiosity. "I heard Blackwood sponsored you. Guess that auction horse turned out to be worth something after all." Before Sarah could respond, Victoria appeared. "Worth more than most," she said smoothly. "Talent isn't always about pedigree, Alexis. Sometimes it's about heart." The morning brought a flurry of activity. Dr. Chen arrived to give Thunder a final check, while Morrison helped Sarah walk the qualifying course. The jumps were higher than anything they'd faced before, set at a challenging 4 feet 6 inches. "Don't let the height intimidate you," Morrison advised. "Focus on the approach, the rhythm. Thunder knows his job. Trust him to do it." As they prepared for their round, Sarah noticed a crowd gathering. Word had spread about the rescued horse competing at this level, and everyone wanted to see if the story was real or just clever marketing. Thomas helped her adjust Thunder's tack one final time. "They're all watching because deep down, everyone loves an underdog," he said quietly. "Use that energy. Make them believe." When their turn came, Sarah felt an unusual calm settle over her. Thunder's ears were pricked forward, his muscles quivering with controlled energy. As they entered the arena, she heard the announcer's voice. "Next to compete, number 223, Sarah Mitchell riding Thunder, sponsored by Blackwood Equestrian." The course opened with a massive oxer, followed by a tight turn to a triple combination. Sarah felt Thunder gather himself beneath her, his powerful stride eating up the ground. They met the first jump perfectly, soaring over with room to spare. The crowd's murmur grew as they navigated the technical portions with surprising grace. Thunder's unorthodox jumping style, developed during his rehabilitation, actually helped them handle the tight turns more efficiently than traditional approaches. "Look at that adjustment," she heard someone say. "That's not just training. That's pure intelligence." They cleared the final fence with precision, finishing well within the time allowed. The applause was genuine, and Sarah felt tears threatening as she leaned forward to pat Thunder's neck. "Clear round for Sarah Mitchell and Thunder," the announcer called out, currently placing third in the qualifying round. Victoria was beaming as they exited the arena. That, she declared, was worth every penny of sponsorship. But tomorrow's technical round is where the real challenge begins. Back in the stabling area, Thunder received a hero's welcome. Other competitors stopped by to congratulate them, and Sarah overheard snippets of conversation that made her heart swell. "Did you see how he handled that triple? Never would have believed it if I hadn't seen it myself." To think he was almost sent to slaughter. That evening, as Sarah settled Thunder into his stall, she found herself surrounded by young riders clutching programs for her to sign. Their eyes shone with admiration as they asked about Thunder's story. Is it true no one wanted him? How did you know he could be a champion? Do you think other rescue horses could do this too? Sarah answered each question thoughtfully, remembering her own dreams and doubts. The thing about Thunder, she explained, is that he was always capable of this. He just needed someone to see past what everyone else saw. Later, alone with Thunder, Sarah reflected on how far they'd come. Tomorrow would bring even greater challenges. The technical round would test not just their jumping ability, but their partnership and trust. "One day at a time," she whispered, pressing her forehead against his. "Just like we've always done." From outside the stall, Uncle Jack watched with pride. "You know," he said to Morrison, who stood beside him, "when she first brought him home, I thought she was chasing an impossible dream. Now I'm starting to think she's teaching us all what's possible." The second day of the Western Regional Championships dawned with a foreboding sky. Dark clouds gathered overhead as Sarah arrived at the stables, the air heavy with the promise of rain. Thunder greeted her with his usual gentle nicker, but she noticed he seemed more alert than usual, perhaps sensing the gravity of what lay ahead. "Technical round today," Thomas said, joining her as she began Thunder's morning routine. "This is where champions are made or broken. The course designer has outdone himself this year. Triple combinations, tight rollbacks, and a water jump that's already got everyone talking." Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she brushed Thunder's coat. The technical round was notorious for separating serious contenders from the rest of the field. Only the top 20 would advance to tomorrow's final, and after watching yesterday's competition, she knew every rider here was exceptional. Victoria appeared with Dr. Chen for a final check of Thunder's leg. "The pressure on that leg will be significant today," the vet warned, running her experienced hands along the previously injured area. "Especially with the predicted rain. The footing will be trickier." As if on cue, the first drops began to fall. The ground crew scrambled to adjust the arena footing, but there was no escaping the fact that conditions would be less than ideal. Sarah watched from Thunder's stall as other competitors began their warm-ups, their horses' hooves throwing up small sprays of water with each stride. "This could work in your favor," Morrison observed, joining them. Thunder's rehabilitation gave him exceptional balance and self-awareness. He knows how to handle uncertain footing better than most. The course walk revealed just how challenging the day would be. 16 jumps, including 2 triple combinations and a double that required a sharp turn immediately after landing. The water jump sat ominously at the far end of the arena, its surface disturbed by the steadily falling rain. "Remember," Thomas advised as they studied the course, "it's not just about clearing the jumps. It's about finding the right rhythm, the perfect balance between speed and control. Trust your instincts, and trust Thunder's." Back at the warm-up arena, Sarah noticed a cluster of people gathered around a screen showing footage from Thunder's rescue. Someone had dug up the auction video, and the contrast between the broken horse in the footage and the athlete standing beside her couldn't have been more striking. "That's what makes this story so compelling," she overheard a reporter saying. "It's not just about winning, it's about redemption." Their turn came sooner than Sarah expected. As they entered the arena, the rain had intensified, creating a misty veil that made the jumps look somehow more imposing. Thunder's ears were pricked forward, his muscles tense with anticipation. "Next to compete, Sarah Mitchell and Thunder," the announcer's voice carried over the rain. "Currently sitting in 3rd place after yesterday's qualifying round." The starting bell rang, and they were off. The first line of jumps came up quickly, a vertical to an oxer, requiring a precise stride adjustment. Thunder responded to Sarah's subtle cues perfectly, clearing both with room to spare. Then came the first real test, the triple combination. Sarah felt Thunder gather himself, his powerful haunches driving them forward. 1, 2, 3 elements cleared in perfect rhythm, drawing appreciative murmurs from the crowd. But it was the approach to the water jump that truly showcased their partnership. Many horses had hesitated at the sight of the rain-disturbed water, but Thunder never wavered. He soared over it with a confidence that brought spontaneous applause from the spectators. The final line demanded everything they had, a tight turn to a double combination, followed by a long gallop to the last oxer, Sarah felt Thunder's strength beneath her, his determination matching her own. They cleared the final fence just as a crack of thunder rolled across the sky. "Clear round." The announcer's voice was electric with excitement. "Sarah, Mitchell, and Thunder move into the lead." The celebrations were cut short by what happened next. As they exited the arena, Sarah felt a slight change in Thunder's stride. Dr. Chen rushed forward, her face concerned. "Dismount!" she ordered, immediately dropping to examine Thunder's leg. The rain had plastered his coat to his skin, making his muscles stand out in sharp relief. "He's showing signs of strain. Not serious, but—" Victoria and Thomas appeared, their expressions tense. "Can he continue tomorrow?" Victoria asked. Dr. Chen straightened up slowly. "Physically, he could. But another round like this one might undo months of rehabilitation work. The decision has to be Sarah's." All eyes turned to her. They had qualified for the finals, were sitting in first place, in fact. Everything they had worked for was within reach. But as Sarah looked at Thunder, she remembered the broken horse from the auction and the promise she had made to always put his welfare first. Sarah stood in Thunder's stall late that night, the sound of rain on the stable roof creating a gentle rhythm. The decision weighed heavily on her mind as she watched him rest. They were so close to achieving what everyone had said was impossible, yet the cost of continuing could be devastating. Thunder lifted his head, pressing his muzzle against her shoulder as if sensing her turmoil. Despite the strain from their performance, his eyes were bright and alert. Dr. Chen had been monitoring him hourly, noting that while the strain was evident, he showed no signs of serious injury. "You know," Uncle Jack said softly from the stall door, "when you first brought him home, this wasn't about winning championships. It was about giving him a chance at a new life." Victoria appeared beside him, her usual commanding presence softened by genuine concern. "Sarah, whatever you decide, Blackwood Equestrian stands behind you. But remember, sometimes the bravest thing isn't pushing forward. It's knowing when to stop." As if to complicate matters further, a small crowd of young riders had gathered outside the barn, hoping to catch a glimpse of Thunder. Their excited whispers carried through the evening air. "Did you see how he jumped today? He's going to win tomorrow. It's like a real-life fairy tale." Thomas joined them, bringing fresh wraps for Thunder's legs. "You know what I think?" he said, helping Sarah apply them. "I think this horse has already proven everything he needs to prove. The question is, what are you trying to prove?" Sarah's mind flashed back to that day at the auction. The dismissive looks, the cruel comments, the certainty that Thunder was worthless. They had proved those people wrong 100 times over. Thunder wasn't just competing at this level. He was excelling, showing heart and courage that had won the respect of the entire equestrian community. "If we withdraw now, at the top of the standings," she said slowly, "everyone will understand why, won't they?" Morrison, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward. "They'll do more than understand. They'll respect you for it. This story was never about winning a championship. It was about showing what's possible when someone believes in second chances." Just then, Dr. Chen arrived for another check. She examined Thunder thoroughly, paying special attention to his leg. "The strain hasn't worsened," she reported. "But tomorrow's course would be even more demanding than today's. One wrong landing." Sarah's decision crystallized in that moment. Walking to the front of Thunder's stall, she took his head in her hands, looking into those eyes that had captured her heart at the auction. "You've given me everything," she whispered. "More than I ever dreamed possible. Now it's my turn to give you what you need." The next morning, as competitors prepared for the final round, Sarah approached the show office. Victoria and Thomas accompanied her as she filled out the withdrawal form. News spread quickly through the showgrounds. Rather than disappointment, she was met with overwhelming support. Riders who had once dismissed Thunder now stopped to express their admiration. Alexis Warner, who had drawn the first ride of the day, even dismounted to speak with her. "You're doing the right thing," she said, her earlier arrogance replaced by genuine respect. "He's too special to risk." The show organizers, moved by their story, invited Sarah and Thunder to take one final lap of honor around the arena before the finals began. As they entered through the grand gateway, the announcer's voice rang out, "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Sarah Mitchell and Thunder, who are withdrawing from today's finals to protect the remarkable horse that has captured all our hearts. This pair has shown us that true victory isn't always about winning ribbons. Sometimes it's about knowing when you've already achieved something far more valuable." The standing ovation that followed brought tears to Sarah's eyes. Thunder carried himself proudly, his stride still powerful despite the previous day's strain, as if he understood the magnitude of the moment. They had entered the championships hoping to prove his worth through victory, but in the end, they had proved something far more important. As they exited the arena for the last time, Victoria approached with an unexpected proposition. "Sarah," she said, "I'd like to offer you a position at Blackwood Equestrian. Not as a competitor, but as our rehabilitation specialist. What you've done with Thunder. There are other horses out there that need that kind of understanding." Uncle Jack beamed with pride. "Looks like you found your calling, kiddo, and it all started because you saw something in a broken horse that nobody else could see." That evening, as the new champions were being crowned inside the arena, Sarah sat with Thunder in his stall. The pressure of competition had lifted, replaced by a deep sense of peace. They had written their own story, one that would inspire others to look past appearances and believe in second chances. "We did it, boy," she whispered, pressing her forehead against his. "We showed them all what real victory looks like." 5 years after the Western Regional Championships, Pine Creek Rehabilitation Center had transformed. What was once a modest facility now stood as one of the region's premier equine rehabilitation centers, with Thunder's story serving as its foundation. The old barn had been renovated and expanded, but Sarah insisted on keeping Thunder's original stall exactly as it was, complete with Morrison's brass nameplate. On a crisp autumn morning, much like the day she'd first brought Thunder home, Sarah stood, watching a group of young riders working with rescued horses in the outdoor arena. Each horse had its own story of neglect or injury, and each rider had been inspired by Thunder's journey. "Miss Sarah!" called out Emma, a 12-year-old working with a recently rescued thoroughbred. "Star just cleared his first jump. Did you see?" Sarah smiled, remembering her own excitement during Thunder's rehabilitation. "I saw. Remember what I told you about patience? Every small victory is worth celebrating." Thunder, now semi-retired at age 12, grazed peacefully in his private paddock nearby. His coat still gleamed in the sunlight, and though he no longer competed, he carried himself with the quiet dignity that had always set him apart. He had found his true calling as a therapy horse, helping nervous or traumatized horses regain their confidence. Victoria Blackwood's prediction had proved accurate. Sarah's gift for rehabilitation work was in high demand. She split her time between Pine Creek and Blackwood Equestrian, where she ran a specialized program for injured show horses. But her heart remained with the rescue cases, the ones others had given up on. "You know what makes this place special?" Uncle Jack said, joining her at the fence. "It's not just about fixing broken bodies anymore. It's about restoring faith in horses and in people." The evidence of their success was everywhere. Photos lined the office walls, dozens of before and after stories of horses who had found new purpose under Sarah's guidance. But pride of place belonged to the framed article from Horse and Rider magazine, titled "The Thunder Effect: How One Horse Changed the Face of Equine Rehabilitation." Dr. Chen, who now served as Pine Creek's full-time veterinarian, often used Thunder's case as a teaching tool for veterinary students. "The physical rehabilitation was just part of it," she would explain. "The real breakthrough was understanding how to rebuild a horse's spirit along with its body." That afternoon, a familiar black SUV pulled into the driveway. Thomas Blackwood stepped out, followed by a film crew. The documentary they were making about Thunder's legacy had drawn international attention to equine rehabilitation. Ready for the final interviews? Thomas asked, approaching Sarah. The film festival people are already calling it a game changer for equine welfare awareness. As the crew set up their equipment, Sarah led Thunder from his paddock. Despite his age and past injuries, he moved with natural grace, his eyes bright with intelligence. The camera followed as she worked with him, demonstrating how he helped other horses overcome their fears. The most important lesson Thunder taught us, Sarah explained to the camera, is that value isn't about perfection. It's about heart, courage, and the willingness to try again when the world has given up on you. Later that evening, after the film crew had left, Sarah received an unexpected visitor. Frank Cooper, the trader who had dismissed Thunder at the auction, stood awkwardly at the office door. "I heard you were taking new cases," he said, gesturing to his truck and trailer. "Got a mare. Good bloodlines, but she's lost her nerve after a bad fall. Nobody wants to work with her." He paused, looking at Thunder in his paddock. "I figured, well, if anyone could help her." Sarah smiled, understanding the unspoken apology in his request. "Bring her in. We'll evaluate her tomorrow morning." As the sun set over Pine Creek, Sarah sat in Thunder's paddock, just as she had done countless times over the years. The stallion rested his head in her lap, his presence as comforting as ever. "Look what you started," she whispered, scratching his favorite spot behind his ears. "All those people who said you were worthless. You proved that sometimes the greatest champions aren't the ones who win the most ribbons, but the ones who show others what's possible." In the gathering dusk, she could hear the sounds of the facility winding down for the night, horses nickering softly, volunteers completing their evening checks, the quiet conversation of staff planning tomorrow's rehabilitation sessions. Each sound represented a life touched by Thunder's story, a reminder that sometimes the greatest victories come not from achieving personal glory, but from inspiring others to believe in second chances. Thunder's legacy lived on not just in the horses they rehabilitated, but in the philosophy that guided their work, that every horse, like every person, deserved the chance to show their true potential. The broken horse from the auction had become more than a champion. He had become a symbol of hope, proving that with faith, patience, and understanding, even the most damaged spirit could heal and thrive. As darkness fell over Pine Creek, the lights of the rehabilitation center glowed warmly, a beacon for those who still believed in miracles. Thunder's story had ended not with a championship trophy, but with something far more valuable, a legacy of hope that would continue to change lives for years to come.